Hello, my name is Chris Scanlon, and welcome to our O.W.L Talks, or Outstanding Ways of Leadership. The O.W.L Talks is our ongoing leadership program within the Center for Student Development, where we give you the tools to help you become an effective student leader in your organization. This week's topic is going to be recruiting your replacement, a way to create a pipeline of leadership within your student organization. First, some introductions. Like I said, my name is Chris Scanlon. I'm the coordinator of civic engagement within the Center for Student Development. Been here since 2018. Some of the qualifications I have that I feel make me qualified to talk about this topic is one, I'm the advisor to Helping Hand Service Ambassadors and our alternate spring break site leaders. So I do have experience with kind of guiding student leadership and training them on their leadership. And also, I've been highly involved in student organizations since I was an undergrad. I've been a member, and I've been an involved member. I've been a committee member. I have been involved on different executive boards and executive officer positions. So I feel like I have kind of a bevy of experience to kind of talk about this, and I've seen both successful organizations as well as unsuccessful organizations when it comes to leadership and executive boards. So before we begin, I want you to take a moment to think about your position in your student organization. I want you to think about everyone who's actively involved, members, executive boards, everyone who's involved in your organization. If tomorrow you found out you were leaving TW and your position, I want you to kind of think about and write down at least 5 members that you would trust to do your job effectively. And then once you finish that, I want you to think about those 5 members that, they could fill my job now. How many of them are already officers? How many of them are graduating this semester? This is an important thing to think about. I want you to always think about this throughout this presentation when you're getting people to be a part of your executive board. Will they be able to be in that position next year? Yes, they could fill in your position right now. But to keep that pipeline of leadership going, you want to be forward thinking. So to kind of give an overview for today, we're going to talk about the benefits of creating a pipeline of leadership. We're going to talk about recruitment, specifically recruiting for executive boards, not just recruiting for your organization. Transparency within your executive board, retention, leadership development, and conversations about the future. So why do we want to create a pipeline? There's a multitude of reasons why, but the biggest one is that no matter how invested in the organization you are, nobody will be in the organization forever. You are in college. You will graduate. Even if you're involved in your organization as a freshman, your second semester you join the executive board and you're just going through all these ones, you're keeping the organization together, you're the glue that binds them, you're still going to graduate, or life will happen. No matter what happens, you can't be a part of the student organization for a living. You will have to move on. And so it's one of those, we want to make sure that you're leaving your organization in the best place, better than you found it. So some of the benefits of creating a pipeline of leadership within your organization. One, it creates more involved members. If you have members that are part of that cycle of eventually becoming more involved either in committees or on your executive board, they see that clear path, they're going to be more likely to do more things. They're going to be more likely to be involved and invested in your programs and in your meetings. It also makes transitions smoother. When you're transitioning to that next executive board, it's the difference between having half an exec board, transition from a full exec board to a half. If you're transitioning from full to full, it's going to go much smoother than if you're having to figure out, okay, which people on our roles can do multiple jobs. It also creates a longer living student organization. Some of the greatest or most seemingly involved organizations have best executive board. Some of them can be gone within a year or two because after that phenomenal executive board, transitioned out, they didn't build up enough to kind of follow through after, and then they kind of wither away. So like an organization I was part of, we had phenomenal executive board. Everyone was on the same page, but unfortunately we were so focused on what we were doing. We didn't think about our president's graduating, two people on our executive board are transferred to another organization, and then we ended up with barely anyone we weren't thinking about who was falling afterwards. We were just focusing on ourselves, and the organization kind of died out in the next within 2 years because we didn't think about who was coming next. It also helps you weather unexpected change. An example I'll give, an organization I advise, this year we've had to go through three different people in the same position. And it wasn't anything bad that they did. It was just life happened. They unfortunately had to step down from their position. And so now we're on our third one. And so you never know what's going to happen. You can't predict life. So it's good to have, a bevy of options of who could potentially step into that role. Also, members are going to buy in easier. They're going to buy into your decisions. They're going to buy into what you do, your mission, your values, if they see that there is a path for them to follow to be able to have a seat at that table. So next I want to talk about recruitment, and specifically about quality over quantity. Now this doesn't mean that, okay, you just focus on recruiting 2 people instead of multiple people. Different organizations are going to recruit or have different recruitment needs. So specifically I want to focus on when you're recruiting members, what you're focusing on when you're potentially looking out for members who could be on your exec board in the future. Like I mentioned earlier, we're thinking forward, not in the now. So one, find invested members. When you're, if they're early on, you notice that, oh, they're coming to all of our events. They're super engaged in meetings. They're speaking. They're coming up with ideas. Take note of those, because one invested member on executive board is worth more than 5 iffy members that commit. If they're you could have 5 members on your executive board, but those 5, their commitment isn't, they're not super invested. That one invested member is going to be worth more than them. Also, on that note, be careful about inviting overly involved people. Organization I've seen, we all know this. We all know that student, that person who's involved in a million different things, the presidents of 5 different organizations. Well, yes, there is a chance that, okay, they could be on your executive board and they could knock it out of the park like they're knocking everything else out of the park. But it's also risky, because if you're stretched too thin, you can't give your 100% in that role. And at some point, you have to prioritize some things over the other. So be careful when you're offering an executive board position to someone who is already super invested in many different things, because there is a chance they might have to step down, or they might not be able to put as much into the role as you're wanting them to. Next, when you're recruiting, and this goes into recruiting any sort of members into your group, but also recruiting on your exec board, inform them what your organization is all about. Inform them of what the executive board is all about. When I've been to many an org fair, and one of the most common expressions I see is oh, we're a chill group, we're a fun group, we're a very relaxed group that can get along. Cool. That might not necessarily get people in the door, because a lot of organizations say that. What makes your group unique? What makes your chill group unique compared to that chill group that's 2 tables away? If you're able to inform them of that, you're going to be able to get more people in the door and on their way to being on the executive board. Next, find the right fit, but be open to where you find members. You don't want to just put someone in a position to fill a space. You want to make sure it's the right fit, but also, you'd be surprised who ends up being invested in the organization. Sometimes we always think about okay, the most talkative person in this group of members, oh, they're going to be in a leadership position. But sometimes that quiet member who kind of seems like they're off to themselves, next thing that's oh, you're at everything. Oh, you're part of this committee and you're contributing ideas. Oh, I didn't know you had those skills. Oh, I didn't know you were you brought 10 people to a meeting this past week. You'd be surprised who is invested in the organization. Don't just assume who it is, and don't just go based off first impressions. And also, don't just rely on your friends to join your exec board. Something we run into is, someone's on the executive board. They need someone to fill a role, and they talk to their friends. They're oh, you should join the exec board. We already like each other. We can do this we can run this organization as well. Well, you know, it depends on the people, it depends on the group of friends. But, you know, if you're recruiting your friends to join exec board and they're not invested in the organization, like literally being a part of the exec board is the first time they're being involved in the organization, there's a big risk it might not work out. And you don't always have to be friends with your executive board for it to be a good executive board. And not every executive board is friends with each other, and that's okay. So next, I want to talk about transparency of leadership, being open about that path of leadership, about what it means to be a part of the executive board in your organization. One of the ways you can do that is making sure, you know, if in your constitution, you have it labeled out, the levels of involvement, what it is specific positions do. A member should be able to read your constitution and know almost everything about the organization, all the structures, all the positions, all the plans in place, all the sorts of things they would need to know. They should know, okay, here's what I can do if I'm part of a committee. Here's what I do if I'm a site leader for an event, or, oh, here's what I do if I'm a executive officer in the specific organization and all the responsibilities for it. Explain out those levels of involvement and explain out, like, hey, here's what we look like, what are the requirements to be a part of this. Because if they know that ahead of time, they already have a blueprint of what they need to do to get to that role. And also, it's not just about having the Constitution, it's also informing your members of what the Constitution is, where to find it, maybe even reviewing it and, like, with members on a regular basis, just so they are aware of those things. Also, consistent messaging. Consistently talk with members about what it is they can do in the organization. Obviously, you do it in an organic way, but you know, a lot of times you are selling, when you're asking members to take on more responsibility, you're kind of selling that position to them. So sell them on the committee, sell them on, like, hey, you are super involved. Would you like to get more involved? We have a committee. Or, hey, we have an event coming up. We need someone to help with marketing for it. Would you be interested? Like, consistently message it. Keep talking about ways to be involved. It can be on every meeting you're mentioning it, or it can just be, you know, having some nice marketing or graphics or pamphlets or something for members to be able to reference and say, like, oh, I can do this. Also, this is an important thing too. Have an open and available executive board. You know, have your current members available for questions, whether it's at meetings or other things. And it can be questions about executive board or just in general. If they know who are the leaders in the organization, they're more likely to connect, they're more likely to be engaged, they're more likely to want to be in that role. Also, talk about what you've gained from your position. People are motivated in different ways. Some people like, oh, I want to do good for the community. Others are like, hey, what is this position going to do for me? I want to eventually be a nurse. How is this position in this organization going to help me get the skills to do that goal? It's okay, whatever the motivation is for them. It's figuring out what it is they can gain from it, and talking about what they can gain from a position or figuring out what they hope to gain can also help you figure out, oh, what position would be a good fit for them. If they're going to gain friends and make social connections, maybe a membership position or a social chair position is the right one for them. If they eventually want to be an event planner as a career, maybe that event planning position, whether it's volunteering, leadership, or social events planning position, like, oh, maybe that's for them. So now this is something you can do. You can pause right here so you can see, so you can look at the instructions to be able to do that. Is, take something to write out. It can be digital or in person. I want you to write down at the bottom, member, or whatever you call your members. And at the top, president, executive, whatever is the highest leadership position in your organization. Now, not every member is going to become president, but you want to think about, if we're having the perfect president, perfect executive director, what's the ideal path we would want them to take to become president eventually? I want you to draw that out, draw that straight line, and then on the different sides, like, okay, what each step we would want them to go through. Think about how could the member be involved in the organization? How can they gain leadership experience within the organization? What things are you doing to help them feel prepared to be in that position? Because yes, there are outside things you can do, but not every student is able to access those things based on schedule. So some examples of what you could have in place for you would want them to be involved with before they become president is: one, they're involved in a committee or multiple committees. I'll leave it up to you how many committees you want them to be involved in. You know, they consistently go to events. They attend as many meetings as possible. You wouldn't want someone who doesn't show up to meetings to be the president of your organization, because there's no telling if they'll show up to meetings once they're president. They interact with other members. If you're an organization that holds elections for positions, that's an important thing to know, because it doesn't matter how qualified they are for the position. If people don't know them, they might be less likely to vote for them. And then, especially if it's like for the president position, it could, they've been on the executive board, or they've been an officer for at least a semester or two, because it's a pretty big risk to have someone jump straight from membership to president. So having those sorts of things would be important for them to have before they become the president. Attending leadership training events, and that's something that y'all put on or y'all have available for members. Like, do they develop these skills within your organization? Also, another example, representing organizations at campus events. Now, these are all just ideas. Every organization is different. You might have different requirements and different sort of things you want them to do. But the important thing is, I want you to draw this out, and I want you to be able to illustrate this both to yourself and also to members. Like, having that available for members to look at. If you have a very ambitious member who they come in, they're like, I'm going to be president one day, or I want to be vice president of membership one day. If they have a specific goal in mind, having a very transparent path for them to take, like, hey, if you do these sorts of things, there's a good chance you will be in this position one day. And so having that available for them to reference or show, that is good for them to note, and it's going to help with that pipeline. So next, we're going to talk about retention and how much of a constant process it is. We talked about recruitment, and yes, recruitment's important, but if you recruit 50 members and by the end of the semester only 5 of them are still there, you didn't recruit 50 members, you only recruited 5. So with retention, it's an ongoing daily process. Yes, in a lot of organizations, there are set, scheduled social events, and setting up consistent ways for members to be engaged with your organization is important. It's also more than just those dedicated social events. It's also constantly fine-tuning the welcoming, supportive environment. When you're at a meeting, making it welcoming and open, talking to those members, making them feel like they are a part of this community is an important thing, and it's something you don't have to have a set structure for. It can just be a warm smile, an inviting conversation, saying hi to them when you see them outside of the organization, like things like that. Also, give members responsibility. One of the biggest ways for someone to buy in is if they have a seat at the table, if they have a say in what to do, if they feel like, oh, I'm getting this experience, like if they're super invested, give them a chance to show their chops and be able to help out with these certain programs. Now, do make sure you are spreading out the responsibility, though, because we all know that students, we've probably all had that person where it's like, oh, wow, I can trust them with everything. Or we've been that student where, oh, they can trust me with everything because I've shown I'm competent in this. And then the responsibilities start piling up. And sometimes, if we're like, oh, this person will definitely be the next president, let's keep giving them more stuff to, because they're pretty much the president or pretty much on the exec board. You give them too many things, they might get burnt out, or they might feel like they're getting taken advantage of. Now, if they're asking for more things, give them more responsibilities, as long as you don't notice that they are burning themselves out or that they're stretching themselves too thin. But spread out the responsibility. Kind of going back to the previous slide about how you never know who's investing in the organization, you might find that quiet member in the committee is really good at marketing. And then you give them the chance to create a graphic for an event. And next thing you know, bam, you have your next VP for marketing in your organization. And had you not given them that chance to kind of get that experience, they might not have applied, or they might not have felt confident to do that. Also positive reinforcement. Give recognition or give, acknowledgement to your members when they're doing some awesome things. And it can be a variety of things. It can be a spotlight. It can be giving like rewards to members for doing a certain amount of things. Find out what is positive, what's positive reinforcement for your members. Some of them have different definitions of it for them. And think of those ways and start doing those. It can be a simple thing as just like, hey, Bill, you did an awesome job out there at that last event. And then they're more likely to come back. Like, keep getting that positive reinforcement. They're more likely to stay. So now let's talk about leadership development. We talked all about like a leadership pipeline, getting members in the door, keeping them in the door, and doing all these sorts of things. But it is important to help provide the tools for members to develop themselves to eventually be on your executive board. So plan events and activities for members to learn leadership skills. And this could be, if you don't already have it, this could be a potential officer position that you have someone fill. Or it could be a responsibility to give to someone, to give to an executive officer or a committee to do. But the important thing is create opportunities, whether it's standalone events, whether it's at meetings, for members to showcase or learn different leadership skills. They can learn about time management, delegation. They can learn about public speaking. They can learn, like, giving those opportunities, and it can be bringing in guest speakers to help teach these sorts of things. Giving those opportunities for members to learn those skills is important, because a lot of time, for some of them, this will be their first leadership experience, their first leadership position, and where are they going to learn those? Where are they going to learn those skills? And also giving them those skills ahead of time. Once they join your executive board, you can spend less time helping them catch up to being a proper leader in the organization and focus on further developing them. And then next, don't reinvent the wheel. Use resources. A lot of times when we develop leadership stuff, there's the risk, there's always the pitfall we fall into where it's, oh, I have to make up this stuff all by myself. I have to come up with all these completely original ideas. You don't have to. I'll give you a secret for a lot of my leadership development stuff. I come up with some of the things like completely on my own, but a lot of times I look at other experts, people that know more than me, and I look at some different documents. I look at some different presentations, some different activities they're doing, and I kind of change them up so they fit with what I'm trying to teach my students. So don't reinvent the wheel, like use resources. And here's some examples of some resources you could use. If you're wanting to learn more about like civic engagement or ways to get involved in the community, you can have someone from the CSD, myself, come and talk to them, give a presentation, look at some of the resources I have. Or if you're wanting to learn about more different student org related things, we have someone in our office, the Center for Student Development, to do that. And then there's other offices on campus that you can use. Like if you're wanting to do professional development for your organization, our Career Connections office does that. Like that's their whole job, and they love talking to students about these things. If you're wanting to go for more social justice advocacy, diversity, or cultural sorts of leadership skills to develop, we have our diversity inclusion outreach office there to do those sorts of things. So you have resources at TW and offices and experts to help you with these things. Also, Pioneer Engage. Specifically, if you go to the Center for Student Development page on Pioneer Engage, we do have different documents that kind of go over specific things with student leadership. We have things over event planning, how to think backwards when you're planning, doing smooth officer transition, different sorts of reflection, different sorts of leadership experiences, different sorts of things you can do with your organization. We have those resources that are on hand for you to use. And then there's just so much more. Look at different organizations out in the world. Look at different colleges. There's all sorts of things. It could be also just like, hey, there's a really good TED Talk about the specific topic I want to talk about in our meeting. Bam, put that TED Talk on there and talk to them about this. So now we've talked about leadership development in your organization. Now let's talk about conversations about the future. These are some of the most impactful ways to get someone to be a part of that leadership pipeline. Now I want you to ask yourself, and this is assuming you're in an officer role, you're in a more involved position in your organization. When you're a member, who encouraged you to go into an officer role? Was it another member? Was it your professor? Was it your advisor? Was it someone who was on the executive board? a lot of times, and you ask a lot of students, a majority of them, they said they went into that position because someone already on the executive board told them they'd be a good fit or encouraged them to do so. And I'm telling you is, tell that member that you think they'd be a good fit for that position. Now, that doesn't mean you promise them the position. What it does mean is, if you notice a member would be a really good, like you have applications or elections open for your membership position, and you notice this member is like, oh wow, they're very social and outgoing. They're really good at coming up with ideas for different fun socials for us. Like, hey, it's like, hey, Jenny, you should apply for this position. I think you'd be a really good fit. And also, tell them exactly why. A lot of times when we hear that, when we hear good things about ourselves, sometimes, we have a tendency to think like, oh, they're just saying that. They're just saying that to be nice, or, oh, they just want more applicants. But if you tell a member like, hey, I think you'd be great for our, education and advocacy position because you are really good at teaching and really engaging in our discussions. I think you're really passionate about advocacy. They're more likely to believe you. They're more likely to apply. And they're more likely to listen to you than you think. You as student leaders have, and I'm jealous of it as a professional, you have more pull with your peers than you think you do. People in your organizations respect the weight of your word more than you think. And that can come in, and that can be a good thing when you're encouraging to do something. That can also come back to bite you if you do something not so good. But I want you to focus on convincing members to be a part of those positions and why it benefits them. They're more likely to listen to you than they are to listen to your advisor or listen to a staff member. And then start talking to them. And once you tell them that, hey, they'd be a good fit, this is why you'd be a good fit, start talking to them about the skills they would need to succeed in that role. Like, if you're giving them those opportunities of like, hey, in the marketing position, we are doing a lot of social media, creating graphics, that sort of thing, being able to manage your time multiple ways. Like, telling them that ahead of time helps them, especially if you're talking to them early on about their fit for a position. That gives them the opportunity to look for those skills and develop themselves to be able to get those. And it can also be an opportunity to plan those sorts of events and programs and activities to help members get those skills for those positions. And that's the way. Show them ways they can work on those skills. So that is this OWL talk about the different ways you can create a pipeline of leadership in your organization. And I just wanted to reiterate some key points. 1, you won't be in your organization forever, so leave it better than when you found it. 2, create simple ways for members to develop themselves into future executive board members. If you have opportunities and you put them out there and they're visible and simple enough for students to be able to comprehend and do, then you have yourselves some future executive board members. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. My email is cscanlan1@tw.edu. And before we're done here, just as a reminder, our next OWL Talk will be on March 2nd. The topic will be officer transitions, because we'll be getting to that point in the semester. So if you're interested, be on the lookout on Pioneer Engage, different social media. We will have it out there along with the Zoom link to go through to be able to RSVP and go to the event. But thank you so much for showing up and watching this, and I hope you have a wonderful day.